The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Well, another Wednesday in the books and another opportunity for Dan to get his butt kicked in DFS. Yes, it would appear very little changes on a week-to-week basis every time I get pretty close, only to find myself squeezed out by about 20 points. It's the same thing every time. I believe I'm sitting on, what's the final number? I think I was 13 points out of the money in this one. No, 15. 15 points out of the money. It's the same thing every week, man. I have one or two key mistakes. This time it was playing anybody on the Indiana Pacers. The rest of my lineup was actually pretty good. If I could have peeled out Corey Joseph and Miles Turner, and particularly Miles Turner, who I needed more from, I could have gotten over the hump and maybe won a couple of dollars. Sounds like I'm sad, but I am dealing with a little something in my throat this morning, so you'll just have to bear with me. I think that if I just keep yelling, eventually it'll clear itself. Maybe not. Time will tell. Been doing this yelling into a microphone thing long enough to know that sometimes you just have to gut it out. This is Fantasy NBA Today. I'm Dan Besbris. It's Thursday's edition. We have a relatively short Wednesday to go over that included 5 blowouts. I would say at least 4, and you could probably argue 5. You almost could argue 6. So it's a really uninteresting card to go over. This is probably going to be, this is by the way, this is called Bad Broadcasting 101, but I'm going to say it right here at the outset. This is probably going to be one of our least impactful shows of the entire season so far. Because to me, I don't know that there's almost no one whose value actually changed from a game-to-game basis. I have a couple of thoughts related to perhaps the Washington Wizards because Otto Porter got hurt. That might be one thing worth exploring. The Pelicans, you've got this ragtag fill-in team, but Randall, Moore, Peyton, AD, all of these guys could be back by the end of the week. So I don't think that we're really going out on a limb and grabbing, Kenrick Williams for the long haul here. Jahlil Okafor, I think probably a lot of you are already streaming anyway. But anyway, we'll go through this thing chronologically. We'll do a very quick DFS rant because I'm just sick of losing by the same amount every week, and give you a preview of a slightly larger than usual Thursday. And I know I said that I like when you have the same number of games basically every day throughout the week, and in general I do. It was just a really bad Wednesday. There were 2 competitive basketball games yesterday. 2 out of 8. That sucks. And it's not like the All-Star break is coming up. It's the trade deadline. That's a week from today, which, by the way, that's a really cool thing. And, set your calendar. Mark 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. That's when our live show goes up. We start at 9 a.m. We run through 1 p.m. So it's a 4-hour show that runs right through the deadline at noon Pacific time. And then we'll have anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes after the deadline is done just to kind of rehash everything. We'll probably sign off sometime around 12:45 or 1 o'clock. And then, who the heck knows? I mean, I don't even know if there's going to be a traditional Fantasy NBA Today that particular day. It's possible that I just package the last hour of that trade deadline show and turn that into the podcast because I don't think I'm going to have the pipes to do a 5th hour that morning. I don't even know when I'd do it. Timing just wouldn't even allow. So anyway, that's where we sit right now. At Dan Besbris on Twitter if you'd like to give me a follow. Big thank you once again, as always, to our pals at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company for helping partner to deliver our DFS contest. The number 2 prize winner will take home that goodie bag. I think that's Rowdy, although it looks like there's one guy. I got to double check. I took a screenshot of it at about 9:30 p.m. yesterday when it looked like all the games were done, but I guess there's still, I looked back at the clock and there was a little bit of time left in that Utah-Portland game, but I don't think anybody relevant was still playing. So I'm pretty sure Rowdy 18 is your Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee winner, and Makoro is the Hoop Ball t-shirt prize winner, and he just ran away with it. An absolute monster of a lineup that included outstanding fill-in guys like Monte Morris, Wayne Selden, Jared Bayless, Terry Rozier, Darius Miller, and then the big bopper, Nikola Jokic, bringing it all home with that 65-pointer. So nice work there. Dominant effort for first place. Congrats to the winners. Congrats to the top 20 that all took home $18.75, and we'll do it again next week. The games. Let's do the games. Let's talk about what happened on Wednesday night. This won't take all that long. We'll do a little bit of a quick promo in the middle of today's show because, frankly, I haven't really bugged you to do many things in a while, and it's going to be about trying to get our ratings and review count up a little bit here. We had a great push to start the year, but it has stagnated a tiny bit. And then we'll get you situated for Thursday, where you've got a handful of revenge games and a couple of fantasy things to watch as well. My guess, by the way, is that while some of our shows still hover in that 1 hour mark, this one will probably be closer to the 30 to 40 minute window. How many times do I say that and then I end up talking for 40 or 45 or 50 minutes? But I really think it's the case. Because look at how terrible these games are. Dallas in New York, a blowout at Madison Square Garden, which meant the Knicks wiped out of this thing early. Tim Hardaway Jr. was not good. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually kind of need Emmanuel Mudiay back. Luke Cornett, we don't really know what his status was. It sounded like he was expected to miss at least 2 weeks. Enes Kanter got to play 9 minutes in this ballgame. That's how out of hand it got. The big notes in this one, Mitchell Robinson, 24 minutes, 1 foul. Yes, he missed all 4 of his free throws, and that's a soul-crushing number, but 4 points, 7 rebounds, a steal, and 4 blocked shots again. He is an insane menace in the shot-blocking department, and he, to me, is a must-own guy just for that one category. He's carrying teams by himself right now. Otherwise, who cares? You know, Trey Burke should have enough shots to be relevant, but really more of a points league kind of guy. Same deal with Kevin Knox. This is a team in full tank mode, and it got ugly quick. Dennis Smith Jr. had a triple-double, 13, 10, and 15 with 0 3-pointers and 0 steals or blocks. It's weird to complain about a triple-double, but this is one of the least impactful fantasy triple-doubles of the year, outside of, like, if it was 10, 10, and 10. But 5 turnovers, 5 out of 12 shooting. There was a lot to dislike about it's the weirdness of Dennis Smith Jr., folks. That's really what this one all comes down to. I think I find myself now rooting for the kid because it seems like the world has turned against him a tiny bit, and it's not really his fault. He just was overhyped. He was never as good as everybody thought he was going to be in Summer League or whatever it was. And he's showing some signs of life here, so hopefully he can get himself maybe a trade value situation, get moved to a spot where he's not behind Luka Doncic. But from a fantasy perspective, no. I mean, you see the holes in his game even while having the best game of his career. I would love it if DeAndre Jordan could miss a game or two. I've said this before. I think Dwight Powell could be a fantastic fill-in option. But otherwise, you know, he got 11 and a half minutes out of Dirk Nowitzki just playing because he was at Madison Square Garden, and he scored 14 points. That's how bad the Knicks are. And nothing else in this one. I mean, Knicks just got to get healthy. I think the other thought on the Knicks side would be Cornette, and whether or not you want to stash him now or if you want to wait a little bit longer. I'm in the wait a little bit camp because I don't know. It sounded like his ankle sprain was pretty bad. It sounded like he might miss more than those 2 weeks. And he's not, to me, good enough to be worth squatting on for a month. If it's a week and a half, yeah, that's totally fine. But like 4 weeks for Luke Cornette, that 4 weeks is what you squat on a guy who's going to be a top 50, top 60 dude. I don't know that he's getting that high. Charlotte blown out in Boston. To me, there were no storylines in this ball game. I don't care about any of this stuff. Kemba was okay. Marvin Williams was okay. Nick Batum was okay. Blah, blah, blah. Boston side, Terry Rozier, the obvious fill-in for Kyrie Irving. Al Horford's been playing well. Jaylen Brown tends to play well when Kyrie is out also. Jason Tatum had a pretty good game. They put up a whole bunch of points, and so everybody got in on the act. Bench, starter, whatever. You guys know how I feel about the Boston Celtics. To me, the efficiency in this ball game floated a lot of that stuff, but in general, there are too many games where guys like Hayward disappear, and Marcus Morris had a bit of a down stretch lately. Jason Tatum has been good this year, but I think he's been short of great. He's number 56 in 9 cat. And everybody assumed he was just going to make this big jump into like the top 40 range. And I just, with the amount of other guys on that team, it never seemed feasible. He looks good, but he doesn't have the opportunity on that team. So no value adjustments there either. Chicago, Miami. This, believe it or not, was almost a blowout, but neither one of these teams changes their rotations because of that anyway. So, let's just take a quick look at it. Wayne Selden, 20 points, 8 assists in this ballgame with no Zach LaVine. So if you're looking at Selden and you're thinking, here we go, I would remind you that he had a good game, a terrible one, and then another good one, but no Zach LaVine, and that allowed a whole bunch of extra shots for everybody. So, are you picking him up? Probably not. But he's definitely going on the watch list. Bobby Portis got himself a little Chucky in 25 minutes off the bench. And that's what you're hoping for if you picked him up. There's never going to be a ton of defensive stuff. It's going to be mostly scoring, some rebounds, some threes. Lauri Markkanen did most of the rebounding in this game. Chris Dunn, not efficient, but did have 14 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds. This is more the line that you're hoping for. You just expect him not to go 1 for 3 at the free throw line. And Jabari Parker was terrible, which I think was pretty easy to predict. Miami side, there was a certain logic to the weirdness in this one. Hassan Whiteside got himself into foul trouble and played like 6 minutes in the first half. He played 9-ish minutes in the second half, got into more foul trouble, and then just didn't get back into the ballgame. And yet somehow he ended up having a better fantasy line than Bam Adebayo, who played 33 minutes behind him and had 13 and 7 with no defensive stats. 4 turnovers for Bam. Come on, dude. This is like the one shining moment you have, and you screwed it up. Anyway, this is a good example of why Whiteside is still the better fantasy guy between those two dudes. We got a Kelly Olynyk sighting in this ball game. No D. Wade, no Derek Jones Jr., who's out for a while with the serious knee injury. Goran Dragic likely out for about another month as well. Tyler Johnson played 27 minutes in this ballgame. Josh Richardson, 38. Wayne Ellington got back in there now for 2 games in a row. He had 33 minutes in this ballgame. Is that because Tyler Johnson missed 1 and then D. Wade missed 1? Or is this the reintegration of Wayne Ellington in advance of the trade deadline? I don't have the first bleeping clue with this team. I really don't. Whatever Spo says to the media, it doesn't matter. Whatever the questions are that are floating around, they don't matter. It's just whatever the hell he wants to do on a night-to-night basis, and it's maddening. I would keep an eye on Wayne Ellington. He has the fantasy profile to be really interesting because he's out there just chucking away from downtown. Field goal percent is never going to be very good for him, but he's the kind of guy that could pile up 3 3-pointers a night if somebody gives him the time on the court he needs. He'll also get you some steals while he's out there, minimal turnovers, and a good foul shooter. So he's one of those 3-point specialists that can actually climb into the top 100, but he's going to have to play. So how soon can we make a move on that? I would say the time would be now if you have something totally useless to cut, but he didn't play for 2 weeks. He didn't play for a couple weeks before that. Who knows if he just completely vanishes in the next ballgame again? It seems, I would say, likely, in fact, that he just doesn't play in the not-too-distant future. But there's also a chance maybe you grab him, you sit on him, and he gets moved to a spot where he does see playing time. There are a lot of clubs out there. 76ers could use some more floor spacing. Lakers could desperately use some floor spacing. Maybe he ends up in a spot where somebody gives him 25 to 30 minutes a night. I don't know. But in that scenario, if he's taking 10 3-pointers a game and nothing else, then he's worth it. So keep an eye on that. I doubt anybody else is making a move on Ellington after playing 2 games basically in an entire month. But this is what we do on this show. We watch every little stinking guy as they whiz by, and we think, is this thing worth my attention for 5 seconds? And I'd say yes in this spot. A couple seconds of your attention is warranted. Monty Morris, big-time fill-in opportunity here with Jamal Murray out. I would actually say he is a must-stream guy. Denver plays again on the 1st, so they have 1 day off between games, and the 2nd. They've got a back-to-back in there, and Jamal Murray has been in relatively bad shape. There was just sort of no real update. He was ruled out a day in advance on this New Orleans game. He hasn't played since the 25th in Phoenix. We don't have an official timetable on him, but if he was that far away for the game on Wednesday, I've got to think he's probably not playing on Friday or Saturday either. And so maybe you scoop up a Monty Morris and see if you can squeeze a couple of games out of him. In a games cap league, if you're talking about 820 to 900 games, what do 2 games matter? Not much. But if you're throwing a Monty Morris in there and he posts 2 games like this, this is a top 25 fantasy line. 2 games at a top 25 guy is a lot better than 2 games of a top 115 guy. Those little things, they add up towards the end of the year. If you do that 10, 15 times over the course of the season, that is a difference maker. One time, no. But it's that same thing where it's like, well, if one person recycles, does it matter? But if a whole world recycles, it's a big deal. If you play the proper stream guy one time a year, it doesn't change squat. But if you do it a whole bunch of times and you don't do it in a way that uses up games unnecessarily, it will eventually help your team. By the way, there's a lot of hate for Gary Harris these days. He actually had an okay game, just missed a whole bunch of shots. If he's making his buckets in this game, you're talking about probably a 16-2-4 game with 4 defensive stats and 2 3-pointers. He was really a handful of made buckets away from a giant fantasy line. So, I mean, buy low if anything. He's injury prone, so in a head-to-head league, that's kind of a tough pill to swallow. But you could have him for pennies at this point. New Orleans. I have some thoughts. I am in the camp that doesn't think they're in full team shutdown mode yet. They do appear to be doing it right now, though. And to me, it seems like this is a move where they're figuring out what they can get for some of their guys before the trade deadline. Anthony Davis was already ruled out. So you can go conspiracy theory on that one if you want. Sounds like he might play by this coming weekend, which would be before the trade deadline anyway. So if he plays, then everybody with the tinfoil hats, you got to put him away for a little bit. Etuan Moore, he's just out. That one's a weird one, I'll admit. Julius Randle, he's dealing with an ankle thing, so that's not all that crazy. And then Drew Holiday, who's likely also on the trading block, is out there playing 36 minutes a night. So if you think it's just full team shutdown, that part of it doesn't really make sense. Are they seeing what they have in some of their young guys right here? It's a strange time to do it, to officially pull the plug on this season, and it augurs poorly for what comes later. And that, to me, is what's a little bit more nerve-wracking than what's happening right now. Because I think we see these other guys, Elfrid Payton, another name, by the way, who's just out right now. We're calling it an ankle, but I don't know. Let's start with the names individually. Julius Randle, Etuan Moore, Elfrid Payton. I don't know that this team thinks they're actually going to be getting much for those guys, if indeed they're on the trading block. But they also know that with Anthony Davis asking out, they have to try to basically trade everyone. So, fine. If you want to hold these guys out for one more week, so be it. But the guys that don't get traded are probably going to go back to playing, because it's kind of too late for New Orleans to go into a full tank mode. And so with that in mind, I wouldn't really advise picking up Kenrich Williams or Darius Miller or Tim Frazier or even Jahlil Okafor long-term. I mean, it's fine if you want to stream Okafor here for the short burst that he's put together with AD, Randall, and Mirotic all out for this team. But as any of those guys start to come back, you're going to see these other dudes take a hit. Williams is going to go away. Okafor is likely going to disappear unless AD is traded. If AD gets traded, then everything gets thrown out of whack. Darius Miller, we've seen him actually pick up the slack when a few guys are out for this team before as well. Tim Frazier, he's going back to being nothing if Elfrid Payton returns. So what I'm saying here is I'm not picking up any of those guys that have been inconsistent on a night-to-night basis. Jahlil Okafor has been the only fill-in here because they legitimately have no one else that can go out and try to play a little bit of center ball. Cheikh Diallo is the closest thing. And that's not happening. So with Nico, AD, and Randall all out, they just needed some size on the floor. And so Okafor has been getting his 30 minutes a night. Williams has played big minutes 2 games in a row. Miller, as we've said just a moment ago, he does stuff intermittently. Are you picking these guys up and thinking, well, what if everybody gets traded before the deadline? No. It's hard enough to trade one guy, let alone half your team, in one fell swoop. If Dell Demps pulls it off, it would be the most amazing rebuilding coup in modern history. But by all accounts, the reports floating around are that he just turned his phone off. He's just like, I can't even... He hashtagged his life, hashtag I can't even, and just turned his phone off. And it's like, all right, I just can't even listen to deals for Anthony Davis anymore, or Peyton, or Moore, or Randall, or Nico, or Drew, or whoever the hell's going on. I mean, these guys to spend weeks, days, months trying to trade one guy, and the fear with this team is that they're going to trade like 5 guys in a week? No. It's just too hard. It's just too hard. It's too much work to make sure that you're getting the best deal on all of those things. You have 30 teams you're trying to work with, 4, 5, 6 different guys. There's too many names. There's too many players. You need a staff of 85 to try to figure out all the pieces that you should be asking for, how to get the right number. I mean, you could just sort of close your eyes and take an offer that sounds good for each of your guys, but that's probably not going to make your fan base very happy, and you're going to want to make sure you do this rebuild right. So, no, is my answer to should I pick up a whole bunch of these guys? No. Should I buy low on some of the guys currently sitting out for this team? I'm going to say also no. You're at a pivotal point in the season where you're kind of past the time to take a bunch of big-time shots unless you're in that weird in-between. And this is what we talked about on the Real Big Three a couple weeks ago when AD first went down. If you're in that 4-5 spot where you're probably going to make the playoffs even if you screw around a little bit, but your team probably also isn't quite good enough as is to get over the top 1 or 2 teams in your league, that's a spot where maybe you roll the dice. Here's a reason I might not. If you're in that 3, 4, 5 spot, and your league, it's a head-to-head league, let's call it, or even a roto league. Roto league. Let's say that, in a head-to-head league, let's say second place pays. So all you got to do is find a way to get to the finals. There's ways to do that when you're not the better team. Usually you'll lose after 1 or 2 weeks of it, but you can usually sneak by 1 week, maybe 2, with just outgaming the competition, playing smarter. So maybe that's a reason not to go crazy in head-to-head. In a roto format, the reason not to go crazy is, let's say, you're in a league where the top 3 spots all pay. If you're in 4th place, you don't really need to go full roll of the dice unless you're in a world where you're like, you know what? Number 1 or bust. That's a spot where maybe you think about trying to buy low on some of these more fringy guys like a Julius Randle, a Nico Mirotic, who's been good but super injured, and then AD. And I haven't really changed my position on him. I'm in the camp of, I think he's going to play this year. I think there's a high likelihood he sits out games down the stretch. So head-to-head, if your league goes to the last 10 days of the year, you probably can't take that risk unless you're just trying to get to the finals. Like I was saying, try to get that second-place trophy and win a little bit of money. In a roto format, I think I might, if you could get him at any kind of cheap price from an owner that's like, he's not going to play again the rest of the year. Throw him a late first-rounder and roll the freaking dice, man. If you're in 4th place and you've got, I don't know, Dame on your team, who's sitting up? Vooch, some guy who's like sitting around that 9 to 15 range, and I'll pull it up right while I'm talking about it here so we can get the right names in front of us. I'm not talking about Cat, by the way. He's 9th right now, but he's been pretty substantially on the rise since the Jimmy Butler trade. But like a Dame Lillard, LeBron who's coming back, Kyrie is 12, Vooch is 14. Bradley Beal's been on the rise as well. I mean, you could obviously throw him out there. I might even consider like a Giannis, who I know you're like, what am I mean, are you kidding me? But his stat profile is not that different from Anthony Davis, but you shave the turnovers in half, you double the blocks. You improve the free throw percentage and three-pointers substantially. If you could somehow turn Giannis into Anthony Davis just because somebody's panicking, absolutely. But the Bucks are going to be at the top of the heap. You might even get some Giannis rest days down the stretch. Nobody's even talking about that. That's my thoughts on the Pelicans right now. Indiana got blown out in Washington, so I'm not going to overreact to this thing. Thad Young was able to survive the mayhem, and he was basically the only one. Darren Collison had a really rare right now awful game. So did Miles Turner. For Washington, the blowout win created some sort of screwy numbers, and an injury to Otto Porter's big toe. Well, I don't know what that's going to do to him. He's generally a little bit of a slower healer. He's been playing well. Wizards as a team have been playing pretty well, and they won this game substantially. The initial implication here is that it's probably going to mean more minutes for Jeff Green, who's been quietly playing pretty well for the last little bit. By the way, I was looking at the wrong format when I was talking about 8th, 9th places, but you get the idea. I think I was looking at an 8-cat spot. Jeff Green in Washington is only 31% owned, and if Otto Porter's going to miss a bunch of time, he's probably going to play 30 to 35 minutes a game. And even for someone who doesn't have the greatest fantasy profile like a Jeff Green, that's probably enough. You just need one of those wings out to clear the pathway for him. Meanwhile, guys like Satoransky and Trevor Ariza, they'll be fine. They'll bounce back in the next one. You just had a game where the reserves came in and stretched the lead, and so the starters never had to come back into the ballgame, and many of whom exited the game early anyway. The thing on the Washington side that does stress me out a little bit is the Thomas Bryant stuff. He had 6 points, 3 boards, and a block in this game in 19 minutes, and his minutes have been pretty wildly in flux over the last week and a half or so. He has some pretty good games mixed in there, but his minutes have bounced from 16, 26, 21, 20, 30, 23, 19. It seems like it's going to level off somewhere in that, we'll call like 23 range. I think he's around 23 his last 2 weeks. And that's pretty close to enough for him to hold fantasy value. It's kind of, in my opinion, it's right on the cusp, because at 26, 27 minutes, he's very clearly kind of in the green. And at like 19 minutes, to me, he's pretty clearly not. So you're right in between those two. He's ranked number 159 over the last 2 weeks in 22.5 minutes a game. A lot of that, however, is because he's shooting 61% at the free throw line, and the defensive stats have completely vanished. Were those fluky? Now might be the follow-up question, because he was never really known as a big-time defensive stats guy. Maybe the motor is starting to run a little bit dry for a dude who's seeing a workload he's just not used to. He averaged 4.5 minutes with the Lakers last year. Played a total of 72 minutes in the season for LA, and he's up near 800 minutes this year. So if he's experiencing a measure of fatigue, I don't think it would be that crazy to assume that this little slump for him could just go until the All-Star break, at which point you might see a Markieff Morris return. So I'm a little bit down on Thomas Bryant. I don't think this is a buy low time for him. I really think that he's running out of gas, and he needs kind of a recharge game or two. If you know the Wizards' schedule that better than I do, and maybe I can try to look it up even while we're talking, perhaps they have a stretch coming up where they're not going to play as much, but I would have assumed that was the London week, and he didn't really get his wind back in that one. And to Wizards, to me, it looks like they go pretty steadily, right up through the All-Star break. They got a couple days off here, and then they play one over the weekend. They got 4 next week, and then they got 2 leading up to the break. So, I mean, you're looking at about 7 games here where I don't know if Thomas Bryant's going to play enough minutes to make that fantasy impact that we need him to. And Markieff Morris, we may get an update for him. Post-All-Star break was one of those spots, and he's a guy that can play center and can just further logjam that whole spot. Memphis, Minnesota. Karl Anthony Towns was in foul trouble in this one for the better part of the ball game. He ended up having a really nice second half, and Minnesota pulled this one out. thanks to a Jared Bayless streaming sensation right now. Not a whole lot to learn on that side. Jeff Teague, Derrick Rose, both questionable and ruled out a couple hours early, so they may miss another 1 or 2 games, and Bayless is still your guy. Things can only get better for Minnesota as they get healthy. Teague, Rose, Rob Covington, Tyus Jones, these are all guys that are really important to that team, and in their stead, you're seeing Bayless playing 43 minutes, Wiggins 41. It's almost like Tom Thibodeau still running the joint out there. On the Memphis side, on the other hand, because this is to me where things might be shifting a little bit, they're just throwing darts at a wall at this point. They were falling behind. They flipped the lineup around a little bit. Some other guys helped make a run. Ivan Rabb had a double-double in 23 minutes. Go Cal Bears, but that's probably not happening again anytime soon. Bruno Caboclo had his second decent game in a couple of efforts for Memphis. I mean, this is straight up silliness at this point. He's seeing more time, and that's fine, but he's not a fantasy guy for this season yet. Justin Holiday shot 0 for 10 in this ballgame. He did have 6 rebounds and 2 assists, but 3 turnovers. I mean, that's just brutally awful. I'm giving him to the All-Star break because if anybody gets moved off of this team, if they really do finally pull the plug, then he could maybe jump back into a more Chicago Bullsian role where he runs a little more of the offense. What if Mike Conley gets moved? You're going to see a guy like Slow-Mo get a big bump in value along with Justin Holiday, I would think. If Marc Gasol gets moved, does that mean JaMychal Green has wiggle room or Joakim Noah? Frankly, I don't know which of those two guys would play more minutes at center. Noah can put up fantasy value quicker, but could his body actually withstand 24 minutes a game? Maybe. Could Omri Caspi put up fantasy value? I don't think you're stashing anybody on this team, but be aware of who could potentially emerge. And I'm still sitting on Holiday, despite what has been a couple of bad games for him. They do want him to succeed. He's just been in this crazy cold spell for like 2 months now that he could bust out of at any moment. I'm actually kind of impressed that Memphis kept this game as close as they did. I thought that breakdown loss to Denver might be the one that just crushed them. Kent Bazemore made his return for the Atlanta Hawks. They got throttled, but who cares? Baze was on a 20-minute limit, and he looked good in his 19. 9 points, a rebound, assist, and a steal. He had 2 3-pointers. I think he's going to play, his usual 24 to 26 minutes unless he gets traded, because Atlanta is buying into a different kind of losing mentality, which is we're going to still actually try to do things with a measure of tact on the basketball court. But obviously be aware that Bazemore, Jeremy Lin, and Dwayne Dedmon are very much on the trade block, and there are pretty clear winners for a couple of those guys getting moved out. We saw Baze, he missed a month of basketball, and that allowed guys like Kevin Huerter to do more. Taurean Prince would see a bump if Baze goes back out. He was just starting to get back into the swing of things a little bit. With Dwayne Dedmon, if he gets moved, Alex Len and Omari Spellman end up seeing all of the center minutes, and I would take my chances with Len just because he's not 40 pounds overweight. Len was having a really bad ball game, and then he got in some garbage time shots and ended up with 13 and 3. He's a guy that, now that a couple of my teams are starting to get healthy again, finally, I am going to sit on him for a week because I hate his free throw stroke, and he could crush your team with it. Medium volume 60-something% is not going to be fun. But if somehow he can roll his way into close to 30 minutes per game after the trade deadline, that's a center that you have to have out there. When he plays 30 minutes, and he doesn't have that sort of, the Thad Marvin line that I've talked about in the past. His number is a little bit lower because Len is not shy when he gets on the basketball court. His number is probably closer to 27, 28 minutes a game. But look at his game log from this year. If you want to just have that moment where you're like, oh, this is why I might consider this. He's played over 30 minutes this season 1, 2, 3, 4 times total. Now, Dwayne Dedmon has been in and out of the lineup a little bit, But so is Alex Len. So some of the time it just didn't match up right. But in those games where he's eclipsed the 30-minute mark, I'll give you the numbers. First one, October 21st in Cleveland. 16 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 blocks. That was 30-plus minute game number 1. November 13th in Golden State. That's an unexpected one. 14, 7, and 1 on 6 out of 8 shooting, but 2 out of 5 at the free throw line. Oof, gut punch. 30-minute game number 3 was December 23rd in Detroit. 15 points, 17 rebounds, a steal, 3 blocks. Nice. And 30-minute game most recently, January 15th against the Thunder. 24 and 11, 3 assists, a steal, 2 blocks, and a 3-pointer. There are some games mixed in there where he played closer to 28 minutes, and he's been pretty good in those. He had a 24, 11, and 3 game blended in. So this is what you're looking at. Dwayne Dedmon is playing around 24 minutes a game exclusively at center. I think there might have been like 1 or 2 minutes over the last couple of weeks he played at power forward, but it's basically all center minutes, which is really the only spot that Alex Len can play when he's out on the court, because he's 7'2", like 270. He ain't guarding any 4s in the modern NBA. If all of those 24 center minutes pop loose, with Dedmon potentially getting moved to some other team, and sometimes Dwayne sees his minutes get up closer to 30 when it's a competitive game late, not all of those are going to Alex Len, but if even like 12 of those go to Alex Len, he becomes, to me, a top 90 center. Not great because of the free throws and the turnovers. So 9 cat, he'll put a ding on him a little bit, but points, rebounds, steals, blocks, probably field goal percentage. If he's on this sort of high-flying Atlanta team, I think he'll get better looks than he did in Phoenix. And that's worthwhile. That's worthwhile because it could last for almost 2 months if it happens. If Dedmon doesn't get moved, you move along. But now we're at a point where 1 week away. You telling me you can't hold a guy for 1 week? It's like 2.5, 3 games out of some of these teams. Something to think about. And then on the Bazemore one, I don't know that there's anybody that's not owned that you would. Kevin Huerter had a good ball game yesterday, but his fantasy profile is not that great, especially when Trae Young does all the ball handling. And then if Jeremy Lin gets moved, I don't think that changes much of anything. Maybe you see a couple more. That actually might help Torian Prince a little bit because he'll end up having to handle the ball a couple extra times a ball game. And then you got John Collins, who's basically locking down that power forward spot, and so that's why you need those center minutes to pop free. For the Kings, they're just a lot better at home. I think that's really all you need to say about that one. Utah get blown out by the Portland Trail Blazers. Portland just opened this bad boy up early and never looked back. Damian Lillard, 36, 8, and 11. A whopper of a game for Dame. And this is it's a weird season series. Utah blew out Portland twice. Now Portland gets a little bit of revenge. McCollum had 30. Myers Leonard filling in for an injured Yusuf Nurkic had 16, 6, and 4. But you're not doing that. Jake Layman played well again. Maybe they should just finally cut him loose, let him play all the small forward minutes, because poor Mo Harkless with his 21 minutes hobbling around on one leg. Al-Farouq Aminu had a rare off game in this one. I think he'll be okay in the next one. I think Yusuf Nurkic will be okay as well. And then for Utah, Joe Ingles and Rudy Gobert kind of survived this thing, but that was a bad one. They were better when, I like Ricky Rubio, but they were really better when he was out. He kind of gums up the works a tiny bit because nobody has to guard him. You just go under every screen. What's he going to do? Welcome to the modern NBA. Revenge games went 3-2 on this one. Dallas won. Chicago covered and won outright, I should say. Washington won. That's, by the way, despite Indiana coming off that embarrassing 30-plus point loss. We're starting to develop some theories on this stuff, and it seems like the revenge is actually a more important number. Minnesota, unable to cover. They won, but they needed one more bucket to actually cover their line against Memphis, and then Atlanta got blown out in Sacramento. That was one that surprised me because Atlanta got blown out by the Kings in Atlanta earlier this year. I thought they'd have a little revenge on the brain. Not enough, apparently. But still a 3-2 night, so perhaps we're not quite into the part of the season where that angle completely disappears. You just to be a little bit judicious with how you use it. But we will continue to track. That's what we're doing here on the pod, and we will continue to do so. Magic on revenge against the Pacers coming up tonight, Thursday evening. Pistons have a revenge game against the Mavericks. That's the second half of a little bit of a home-and-home thing. They played the first half of that 6 days ago, and Dallas won it by 5. That was a push, by the way. The line was 5. That game down in Texas. And then the Lakers technically are on revenge against the Clippers. This is one I would say take with a grain of salt because the Clippers are basically forever on revenge against the Lakers in LA. This is the life of the Angelino. The Clippers are, for all intents and purposes, the stepchild of Los Angeles, and they always want to get the Lakers. I went to Cal. I know what it's like to be the weird stepchild, where we cared more about every game with Stanford than they cared about every game with us. That's the Clippers. They care every time they play the Lakers, and the Lakers less so. They're also expecting to get LeBron back soon. I believe not this game, but probably the one following, so it's the perfect time for everybody else to just sort of let up. So I don't know that this is your classic revenge game. I'm sure the Lakers would like to try to tip this thing back in their favor, but with as completely beaten as that team is right now, I would be awfully wary treating this as any kind of revenge game in LA, other than the Clippers getting decades of revenge on Lakers and their fan base. From a fantasy perspective, as we again look at the games here on Thursday, Indiana and Orlando, Jonathan Isaac to me is in. He's good to go. Tyreek Evans, presumably still out. I have a theory here that this team might need Tyreek Evans to be kind of their savior down the stretch because everybody else looks completely distraught at the Oladipo thing, and maybe you just kind of need a guy that wasn't there last season to say, all right, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take over a little bit. And does that mean he's worth a stash? Maybe not. I would consider it if you can wait the whatever, let's call it a week probably that he's going to miss with the sore back from his car accident. But if he's playing 25, 26, 27 minutes starting or off the bench, he has the fantasy profile to make that count. So keep a close watch on Tyreek Evans. I think he's going to end up playing a pivotal role for that team to try to bust him back out of their funk. Dallas and Detroit, I don't care about this game. Milwaukee and Toronto, this will be a fun one, but I also don't care about this one from a fantasy perspective. Brooklyn and San Antonio, we were sort of watching Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, but he wasn't all that impressive in that last one. Brooklyn just looking for ways to kind of piecemeal this thing together and stay. They're continuing to play decent basketball, but schedule alternating, getting a little tougher and whatnot, and with no Dinwiddie and no LeVert, life is going to get a little harder. Sounds, by the way, like DeMar DeRozan's going to be back for the Spurs, so let's see what that does to some of these three-point shooters that have been stepping up in his absence. Philly and Golden State, not a whole lot there from a fantasy perspective, other than what's the minutes cap for Boogie Cousins, and then the Lakers and the Clippers. Patrick Beverley, he's been awesome lately. It sounds like Gallo's still out for the Clippers. You know how it goes with him, and so we say, Pat Bev, keep doing your thing out there, kid. Lakers, whatever. Rajon Rondo, you guys know how I feel about all these shooting guards. I've stopped chasing them a long time ago, but the center position battle is the one that's more interesting to me. We saw JaVale McGee go big in the last one with 17 and 14. Another opportunity for JaVale in this one. To me, he's the guy that when healthy, he should be out on the floor a little bit more. The chemistry with Rondo is better for him. Zubats got smoked in their last ball game by Joel Embiid. They needed somebody else, anybody. But this is a different kind of ball game. Clippers don't have a great interior set. Either Marcin Gortat, who's old, or Montrezl Harrell, who's undersized. So you might actually see Zubats play a little better, and maybe you see him get the 26 minutes and JaVale McGee get the 22 or 27-21 split. Still, all McGee needs is 19 minutes to do his damage. Anything over that is gravy, and that's why when he had a bunch extra minutes, he had a huge ball game the last time out. So I'm still in Team McGee, although as I've said on Twitter a few times, and I think even on this podcast, I don't think it's a terrible idea to just have both of them. I just think the upside for the big shot blocker is the one that can make or break a fantasy team a little bit more. Whereas Zubats, his upside is solid contributor in points, field goal percent, and maybe some rebounds. McGee can do that with fewer points and way more block shots. That's the big deal in fantasy sports. You want the tough to win category. But most people aren't going to agree with me right now. So if you're in the McGee business, you could probably buy low on him, or you could have certainly before that last ball game. I tried and couldn't pry him away from a dude. But maybe you have better success than I have if he throws up a dud in this game on Thursday. All right, I lied. It was 45 minutes again anyway. Thanks for taking the time and listening through us. I didn't even bug you to rate and review the podcast, but really, I haven't done it in a while. So to those of you that have been enjoying the show this year, anybody that's doing this on iTunes, if you do it via the podcast app on your Apple mobile device or the iTunes app or the iTunes program on an actual PC, please take the time to drop a nice review for Fantasy NBA Today. It helps move us up the standings. And then in particular, near the end of the offseason, when a lot of folks are looking for that new show to listen to, that helps them find us because we come up as a top result thanks to your fine reviews. So forget giving us any money. Don't worry about playing in a DFS contest. All we want from you right now is a few kind words and 5 golden stars, and we will love you forever. Tomorrow, live with Aaron Bruski at probably around 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will be on YouTube taking your questions with Fantasy NBA Today Live. Myself, Aaron Bruski, again, Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific. And that will wrap up the week. This is your Thursday edition of Fantasy NBA Today, brought to you by Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, a hoop ball presentation. I am at Dan Besbris on Twitter. Would love to holler at you over there. Have a lovely day, everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.